Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to helping business owners prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your terms. This is the Exit Insight podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates-Brownsword, and today I'm talking to Paul Herman. Welcome, Paul, and thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Hey, why don't you start by giving us a bit of an intro to who you are and how you came about starting Bluebox.
Great, thanks, Daryl. Welcome to all your viewers. So I started, my career started way back when as a chartered accountant, and I ended up venturing through what is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, but ended up in their valuations team, just looking at corporate valuations and writing extensive papers on how much a business was worth, when I'd say now, and if I look at market practice, it's a far quicker exercise in real life. So I used to do valuation. I then moved into the private equity world, where I was investing in a number of businesses for a Japanese bank with a team that was with the financier Guy Hands, and I worked with them for a period of 4 years and ended up moving to corporate finance, where, if I ask my wife now, the best way of describing it is it's an estate agent, but rather than buying and selling properties, you buy and sell businesses. And we assist people with exits and with fundraising. And I started my business 10 years ago. I became a senior partner at a leading London firm, and ended up being approached by a former client, one of the guys from Dragon's Den, a guy called James Caan. James and I had a long and good relationship, and he suggested that he start up the business, and we started up our business, Bluebox Corporate Finance, almost 10 years ago now. So it's our 10th anniversary in March 2022. And we've been assisting businesses valued somewhere between £5 and £100 million on either raise money or exit. And I'm delighted to say we've got some great names behind us. I mean, we've had the pleasure of selling a bunch of different businesses, and I have in my career sold a range of businesses with some great brands. Goo, the chocolate dessert brand, is a great case study on a number of different levels. Princess Yachts, which was the business that I sold to Bernard Arnault and LVMH, and those businesses are followed by over 150 in other sectors, and we've gone our merry way doing that. And then very recently, as I was just explaining to you before, Daryl, we've launched. One of the problems with Bluebox is its price point, and to start working with us at Bluebox, we charge somewhere in the region of £40,000, and we recognize that's a big check, and we see lots of very interesting businesses. So we've introduced a new business called Bluebox Velocity, which is effectively tackling the great businesses, but with a much lower barrier to entry in terms of advisory fees. I mean, our products start there at about £1,000, so it's a very different entry point, and that's what we're seeing success. And it was interesting to note when we started speaking about succession planning and what you do. And as I know, you and I both know, the number of sale processes that start and never actually get to a successful conclusion. And so much of that is to do with succession planning, both in terms of people, in terms of culture, and so many things, and the number of businesses we discussed before where there's these real cultural challenges. So we love what you're doing. We think succession planning and exit planning is absolutely a market in its own right. It's a market that's overlooked at the moment. It's one that people think, the analogy I often give is when you actually come to sell your house, I said to someone, if you spend £1,000 on some planning permission and you get it, it'll probably put more than £1,000 onto the price of the property. And in exactly the same way, there's exit planning and succession planning that can be done properly. And we applaud your efforts to bring it really and develop that as an industry.
Well, thanks. And look, I guess working in the industry and working with entrepreneurs and at that smaller, medium, mid-market end of the business, just seeing so many things, repeated behaviors over and over again. And the big one that I've seen a lot is that business owners, they treat their business, their identity is attached to their business, and entrepreneurs are very visionary people, and they create a visionary, and that's what gets them going in their business. And what they miss is that they need a vision for what happens once they leave their business. And without that vision, they get stuck. And that's, and what I've seen is one of the things that stops deals.
Yeah,
So
and it's. I was just going to comment. I think it's very common that there are names above the door, and there's ways to tackle that. And there are brands, and if you have a brand that's related to directly the person, there are things that people can do and do to avoid that. But there are ways to plan around that to make sure that it doesn't compromise your ability to exit.
yeah, good point. Yeah, when your name's on the door, there's a whole lot even tighter association. Well, big question. You already worked in the industry, and you mentioned that you and James started the new business, the Bluebox businesses, after already being in the industry. Was there something that you saw that was missing in the industry that you thought that you guys could meet that specific need, or was it just you thought you could generally do it better than everyone else? Was there a gap that you identified?
It's a great question, Darryl, and interestingly, that was, I mean, at the very beginning when James and I started speaking about creating a business, he and I talked about the opportunity in corporate finance. We had between us, appropriately decent networks. We knew what we were doing. We knew how to build a team. But my immediate comment to James was, we don't want to be building another corporate finance practice, because typically the traditional way that corporate finance works is very much with a low strike rate, which we see in the mid-market. And the mid-market, we define businesses under 100 million sterling. The chances of this, and it increases dramatically, you get lower. You're trying to sell a business for 2, 3, 4 million pounds. The chance of going to an advisor and successfully getting that away is, we believe, around 10%. And on that basis, and there's actually a Harvard Business Review report which suggests, I believe, although I want to have I believe the report says that 1 in 10 businesses that go to market by a professional advisor actually are successfully sold. And on that basis, when we set up Bluebox in the first instance, the whole focus of the business, the entire focus, was around pre-sale planning. It was about what you can do. And there are a number of facets to pre-sale planning, of which succession is obviously an absolutely vital one. But there are others. There's getting your house in order. There's making sure management accounts are correct. It's making sure that your tax stacks up. It's making sure that the legal provision is correct in terms of intellectual property, in terms of regulation. And, it's in terms of making sure people are aligned and making sure the messaging is correct, externally and internally. So there's so many things to prepare for. And people turn around and say, well, actually, we can come to the market now and exit. And our answer is, but you need to do X, Y, Z. And it's not about finding a share certificate. I mean, we sold a business for about 95 million pounds not so long ago, and there's lost share certificates at completion. The lawyers can do that. It's a 500 quid job it's to do, but there are some things that come into pass which are serious challenges to actually being able to sell the business. So if you're going to do it properly, the whole proposition around Bluebox was to say it's about pre-sale planning. It's about making sure that people are properly prepared, because it significantly enhances the chance of the exit getting away. So to answer your question, it was right from the beginning.
Oh, so get them ready. And yeah, it's the obvious piece, isn't it? So many business owners are missing it. And you're saying 10% actually go through. I've been underquoting. I've been telling everyone it's like 40% of businesses, that go to market actually sell. You're telling me it's actually a whole lot lower than that. And yeah, and I guess that's kind of what. And if you look at, and we are there are stats in the market that you can look at, you can analyze, and you can interrogate, which we do. And if you look at those, the strike rate is certainly lower than that which you suggest, for sure. Yeah. So let's get into some meaty stuff for some of the business owners out there who are listening. So in your experience, what are some of the most common or the biggest mistakes business owners when they go, hey, look, I want to take it to market. I'm ready. I think I'm ready to go. Let me get some help, and I'll start talking to some corporate finance people like yourself. What are the biggest and most common mistakes you see?
So number one, objectives. I mean, people don't think about what they want to be doing. And we've seen numerous deals where, a client has been sucked into an exercise because they thought, oh, they want to sell, but they hadn't thought about what they were trying to achieve, or they were trying to raise money. What are you actually trying to achieve? Is it a change in lifestyle? Is it something you're going to want to do? We've sold a business for a gentleman in his 90s once, and the business absolutely needed to be sold. but it was the wrong thing for him to do. He actually should have continued with the business, notwithstanding its demise. It was the right thing for him, for his lifestyle. So people often go in, they don't have a fun on the golf course. They have very little else to do, and the business is everything. So considering your objectives and time, it's a fundamental thing. And that's a good segue into the second point, which is timing. And timing is so important because there are two elements of timing. There's timing that you can control and other bits that you can't. And let me go back to what I was saying. The first piece that you can control is whether you decide to appoint an advisor before or after you hire a chief exec, before you launch a new product, before you close your French operation. When do you choose those questions on timing when you actually go to sell? And people don't consider those. So these are things people don't consider. The flip side is what things are out of your control and what happens when an event such as we used to very sadly cite 9/11, and now we're citing COVID, comes out the blue. You left it too long. There's a risk. There's an ongoing risk with the business. So consider your objectives and consider timing, and not just macro timing, but also micro. When's your seasonality? Are you about to sign the next 5-year contract with a government authority, which will add significant value? Do you wait for before that when you can promise it will happen? Do you take the risk, sign it or lose it, and sign it and actually sell on the back of that? So those are the things really to consider. It's objectives and timing. And then the key things we come on to, I think probably the standout one is, and come on to succession, but there's a lack of readiness for a relatively invasive process, which is due diligence. And that covers areas. Due diligence is not just effectively an audit where you're looking at numbers. Due diligence exercises cover a whole range of disciplines, including legal, tax, which are relatively self-explanatory, regulatory, employment. You'll cover all. Commercial. Is the business in a space that's about to be heavily regulated, or the regulation will change? Is there some legislation? So you need to be prepared for that, and people are unprepared. And so preparing what we would call a data room, and preparing that data and getting ready, make sure that you've got everything in order. And I think the last thing I would point to is the thing that people don't do is they don't look at what we call their opportunity map. And if I may just give a little explanation about what we see. When you come to sell a business, your level of profitability may be X, and let's just pick a number, £500,000 of profit. If you can show someone a very credible way to building a business that you have 1 million, 2 million, and 3 million of profit, when you come to sell, you will get a multiple, a depressed multiple, but on the 3 rather than a very high multiple on the 5. That's how people value, going back to my experience in business valuation and company valuation. Yep. It's about what the business will be making in the future. So if you can present something credibly that says £500,000 goes to 3 million, you might get a multiple of 3 times the 3, £9 million. And of course, you'll go back to the pub and tell your mates, oh, don't worry, I've ended up with a multiple of 18 times, because they look at the £500,000. But the reason that the buyer paid that price was they looked at the 3 million. And therein lies the core takeaway, I would say, for creating value and doing it in the right way, but showing people how you can get from the £500,000 to 3 million with some form of EBITDA or revenue bridge, as it would be known, but doing it in a way that it is growing with the type of business that an acquirer is like to want to see. So in order that you sell your recruitment business, you know that purchasers are going to want probably a niche, a certain level of financial reporting, a particular geography, a particular target. So by creating something that you know is going to be attractive, hence the whole concept of exit planning, to create something that's attractive will allow you to be in the best opportunity to use those key threads of the things that are going to be attractive, to do those to grow from the 0.5 to the 3 million of profitability. And to do that, to go a little step further, Daryl, you need to work out who's going to buy you. And every one of your viewers should go back and let's sit down, and it's a great thing to do around the dinner table. Who's going to buy the company?
Yeah.
Let's put 20 buyers on the list. And better still, let's put 5 different categories of buyer on the list. Who are the people that we sell to? Who are our competitors in overseas territories? Who are our people who are further up the supply chain, down the supply chain? So those are the people that you effectively go to, and you identify them. You think, what will they want to see? Which obviously takes a somewhat of a trained eye, but what are they going to want to see? And then let's start building the bridge from 500,000 to 3 million of profitability based on the key things that they will want to see. And that to me is probably the final thing. It's the opportunity map. It's presenting that, building it and thinking that in the right way. And that way you can get the 3 times the 3 million and 9 million valuation, as opposed to, someone might give you a stronger multiple on the historic, but without the opportunity map, they might give you 5 times the 500,000, 2.5 million quid, a way to create huge value if done correctly.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, I think, is the opportunity map is one of the tools that businesses have that get them a much higher multiple, because every business owner you talk to, they'll all talk about, here's the standard valuation and the multiple for our industry. And I always ask them, are you aware of people who've got higher than that? And they go, yeah, Joe Blogg's got this. Well, I go, why? And they go, well, he just got lucky.
I could bore you and your audience quickly with going into some much deeper valuation analysis. But the reality is that when you look at the methodologies that are used and how people assess, and the only pure mathematical form of valuation really is something akin to a discounted cash flow, where you're discounting cash flows mathematically. The problem is the big flaw. Which of any business owner in the world, very, very, very few, know what your revenue is going to be in the next day, 2 days, 3 days. So you're discounting a bunch of numbers, frankly, which are uncertain. And therefore, the valuation, very much, as everyone says, it's an art, not a science. And there are when people start looking at comparable company analysis, so someone down the road did this and we did this, they don't know the makeup of their workforce. They don't know their gross margin. They don't know their growth opportunities. They don't know the amount of CapEx in the site. So you've got to look very much at valuation, 30,000 foot. And by the way, if any of your viewers would like to talk with any of our team about what the valuation may be of their business on a completely no fee basis, we'd be delighted to do that.
Sure. And as you say, it's a starting point. It's like, let's get in the ballpark, but then it's like anything. What's it worth? Well, it's worth what someone's willing to pay. And so what we've got to do is help make it more attractive. Use that. You talked about an opportunity map. How do we build that? How do we show the potential buyers where the future revenue is coming from? Because at the end of the day, they're buying an investment, they're buying an opportunity, and they've got to assess it against other opportunities.
Absolutely, Darren. And again, it's not just where it comes from, it's from things that they are going to want to see and want to be excited by. And that's the twist. It's making sure that you know what they're going to be excited by. So and we hear about different valuations and we hear language out in the marketplace about referring to strategic buyers. We know competitors, they only really want to buy your client base, so they're not seeing any strategic value. They're going to pay or want to pay the lowest valuation for your business possible. So I guess the question for someone like yourself is, can any business become attractive to a strategic buyer? Can any business become attractive? The answer is no. We see, sadly, a number of businesses which are painted or dressed up as ever they want. The answer is that there's and many businesses, and this is what a lot of owners don't realize, are simply unsaleable, and it's not something they want to sadly contemplate. So the answer is that. But I think when you look at the ways you can find the right buyer, it's about synergies and it's about sales synergies. And when most people talk about synergies in a business, they think about, well, hang on, we've got 2 finance teams coming together. They both cost £300,000. We can lose one, and therefore we enhance our profitability by £300,000. And that's a way of looking at synergies with a ceiling, because the real way to look at synergies is looking at what we would call sales synergies. What do you actually have that you might be able to sell your product or service into the base of the customer base of the target acquirer? And if there's an opportunity for you to sell your product into their base, both geographically and in terms of product, and there's a fit there, and even better, if they are able to sell their product into your base, then dwarfing the savings that I described before in finance come the very real synergies that are sales synergies. And those are the things that can have a dramatic impact on value. And when you layer on top of that competitive tension, a number of buyers in an exercise that want to actually buy an asset strategically, they want to keep someone else out of the market. When you layer those on top of each other, then it becomes, and you layer on top of that a strong growth opportunity presented in the right way. Then you've got the canvas to paint a picture with a very big number on it. But there are some businesses you simply can't do that with. And again, coming back to your point, Darryl, on exit planning and succession planning. We meet business owners a day into their business. We tell them it's the wrong business model. It's not the right thing to do. It's not going to be saleable. Yeah. So it's you can intervene early, respectfully, and identify as those that are going to remain as probably lifestyle businesses. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a lifestyle business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or those that want to create something that's more scalable for a potential exit one day.
Yeah. I think it's Covey that talks about beginning with the end in mind, isn't it? And as you're highlighting, is we really need to think about every aspect of our business model and not just our product. We've got to think about how we scale it, when and how we introduce the management team, what our management systems and structures look like. How do we demonstrate that the management team, can run the business without the shareholders or the founder, right, and demonstrate value? And how do they demonstrate that their planning and their achieving of goals and growth every year is structured and not just lucky? If did they aim for a target and hit it, or did they way overshoot or way undershoot it? Because both are as bad as each other. So there's all those things to put into the mix.
Yeah, no, it's incentivization of the management team. It's a fundamental thing. I mean, we've just completed a deal where the incentivization piece was of critical importance. In fact, one would say that actually a lot of the deal hung around it. So getting that right, incentivizing the right people, not in many cases, depending on objectives, over incentivizing, making sure that that's right and the right balance. And we've seen, and that's the great thing with what we see hundreds of different business owners that have got hundreds of different views on life and how to manage and run their business, all with an infectious passion normally, many who are tired and want to exit and want to do it once and do it in the right way. And that's why the whole piece around exit planning and doing it correctly first time is very much something that we're proud to be involved with. And as I say, it's great that there's others that are recognizing the importance of the industry as a whole.
Hey, I could ask you a dozen more questions. I still don't think we could leave it on a better note than that wrap up. So that's probably an ideal spot to finish this conversation. But I will ask you just one more thing, Paul. And it's a question I ask everyone who appears as a guest on the show, and that is, what's the one key message you want listeners to remember this episode by?
Create your opportunity map.
Beautiful. Hey, thanks for joining me today, Paul, and I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Thanks, Darryl.